I laugh a lot. Like, catch me laughing a lot during
Well, that's
this.
good because my goal is to laugh at least twice every episode.
Yeah.
I think we've hit our mark. So our job is
Awesome.
done.
I love that.
All right, dude. Let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. This week's audiobook recommendation is Design is a Job by Mike Monteiro. Design is a Job is from the A Book Apart series, which is brought to you by A List Apart. I love those series. It's a guide for designers that emphasize the business and communication aspects of design beyond just the creative part. It highlights the importance of things like problem solving, decision making, client management, all that stuff. The book really talks about valuing our work and highlights the importance of good design as a business critical function. It's a really great book. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to start your free trial and download Design as a Job completely free and help support the show in the process. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think this show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So let's see. I can't remember exactly when we met, Andrew. It must have been randomly in a comment thread is how I met most of the people that I've interviewed on the show. We met randomly in a comment thread. Someone I follows you, I guess, and comment on some stuff. And I was like, who's this dude? What's content design? It's interesting because content design is relatively new term for me, at least. I hadn't heard it maybe in the last year. This is the first time I actually heard content design. And so I asked my good buddy, Andrew Astleford, to come on the show to talk about content design, what it is and all that stuff. So I'm really stoked to have Andrew on. For as long as he can remember, Andrew has wanted to write, but he thought his words would be about athletes instead of actions within a user interface, football instead of flows within a digital experience. And in 2018, Andrew transitioned to UX writing after nearly a decade in sports journalism. And today he's a senior content designer at Chewy. He loves life in Atlanta with his wife, his daughter, and his dog. Andrew, welcome to Beyond UX Design, man. I am so excited to have you on. How's it going?
Oh, doing well. I'm so excited to be here, Jeremy. You're right. It's interesting thinking about how people meet these days. Like comment threads is like the new bar, I guess, or the new, the park or something.
It's the new really
meetup. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny, man. I was telling somebody not long ago about they asked me, how do you get all your guests on your show? And I was like, LinkedIn comment threads, dude. That's like, if I didn't know you before that, chances are good I met you some randomly in LinkedIn comments and started having a conversation. If I remember right, you just had a baby and I was commenting about having a kid. And it was like nothing to do with design or UX at all. It was just random kind of, more honest, real conversation. I don't know. Anyway, but I love that stuff. So Andrew, you've got such an interesting backstory, sports journalism. You lived in New Orleans for a little while. That's really badass. Tell everybody out there about you and how you went from journalism into UX writing.
Yeah. Oh, it's been a winding journey. I always tell people it's been kind of like a bohemian lifestyle with twists and turns along the way. I guess starting in New Orleans, it's natural to be a bohemian lifestyle. But yeah, so I definitely grew up loving narrative sports writing. And what I mean by narrative sports writing is long form, kind of back when newspapers were profitable and people wanted to do jobs at newspapers, they had long form storytelling, big Sunday centerpieces, things like that. And so I wasn't close to the Kansas City area, but I read the Kansas City Star online. They had a really good sports section back then with a lot of writers now who went on to ESPN and some bigger national outlets. It was really cool to read them when they were still kind of coming up within the industry. But anyway, I kind of fell in love with the industry that way and just kind of what you can do with words and telling a story in these really creative ways. And so I always loved sports growing up. I love football in particular, college football, things like that. And I kind of thought about doing something within the sports area, but then discovering sports writing and storytelling through sports and kind of thinking about like the wide range of human emotion and themes involved with trial, tribulation, things like that. It's actually really cool to think about what people in the sports area go through and what that can tell us about ourselves as and just people. So anyway, like I really developed an interest in that. So I went to school for it, and it was fortunate enough to spend about 9 years in the industry overall. But yeah, the journalism industry during like from 2010 to 2018 went through some pretty radical changes. Overall, there's a lot more emphasis on kind of bite-sized pieces and
Twitter, TikTok, all that stuff, I imagine.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So anyway, like yeah, it kind of turned to a job that I didn't envision when I first got into the industry, but it was still interesting to try to do it for a while. I experienced some great things. I went from like New Orleans to St. Louis to Tampa to Atlanta for journalism jobs, and had a few layoffs along the way. But then ended up wanting to stay in Atlanta, and that's how I fell into UX and discovering content design in 2018. Honestly, I was interested in kind of doing any kind of writing related role at that point. I just wanted to find an escape hatch from journalism, but I was really lucky to have this opportunity come about first. I was considering things like PR and communications at corporate, things like that. But it was a small team at a company called CallRail here in Atlanta, and it was a great place to just cut my teeth. And content design was still kind of like on the rise, I'd say at that point, a little less mature than it is now, 5 years later. But it was a great place with a growing team and a really supportive environment. And I learned on the job, and it was a great opportunity at that time.
You know, it's really interesting. Again, like you mentioned, you were kind of thinking about PR and working and, you know, kind of not PR is not necessarily marketing, but it's tangentially related to running businesses and selling things and all that, right? And so is that kind of how that sort of evolved into UX writing and content design specifically? I'm just curious, like how did you come across content? Was it just random job posting? You're like, content design, what's that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I guess I should back up a little bit. I tried to leave journalism the first time back in like 2016, and I failed. I was like applying for all these roles. I didn't have
Brought you back
direct
in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it happened. Really. I was really trying back then to leave, and it didn't work out. I just was denied everywhere because I didn't have that direct experience. But then I was laid off the second time in 2018 out of friends socially who was a product manager at the company I mentioned, CallRail, and he knew I was looking and was, hey, we have a UX content strategist opening. You should check it out. So I sent him my resume and I think even some materials and my writing samples. They weren't UX related. It's kind of funny thing now is just kind of like, stories from various media outlets I work for. But yeah, I think that was a really lucky break. And I don't know if I would do the same thing as what I did in 2018 to try to break in now. I always tell people maybe you should show some intention behind what you're trying to do if you're trying to change careers, whether it's a boot camp or just self-teaching online or completing some kind of free exercise. There's a lot of content design exercises out there that people can do for free, but I didn't do any of that. I always tell people
learned on the job.
Do what I did back then. Yeah. So I was kind of really lucky, but yeah, I was just kind of looking for anything. I was like, content strategist job, I can figure this out. And maybe that was hubris or naivete or something, but I kind of just wanted to do something else and was motivated to learn and trust myself to try new career paths. So that's what I did. Kind of learned along the way.
Yeah, well, you mentioned, we were talking on LinkedIn, I think last week or sometime about, life and having to make these pivots without really expecting them, like it's sometimes life just gives you a swift kick in the ass. And, in your case, it sounds like, got laid off. You're just sort of like, I'm going to do it. I'm going out there. I'm taking a chance. And I don't know. I love that. Well, it seemed to have worked out. So, so I'm curious, when we talk about content design, like I said, I've been in this industry now since about 2011, and we used to call them UX copywriters, not even 2011, we didn't call them UX copywriters. I don't think that concept was around, but maybe 5 years ago, it was more UX copywriting, and it wasn't really a job necessarily. There were probably some big companies that, Google and places like that were probably hiring, but most smaller teams never had that. It was more of a job to do versus an actual role that somebody would have. I'm curious, content design is something I've started here recently. Talk to me, and I know, by the way, I've asked you this before on your open chat, which I'm going off topic for a second, but you're every week, is it Sunday or Saturday? Sunday.
I do that.
You do an open chat, and I asked you this question a while back. I'm going to ask you to repeat yourself so everybody listening can hear it. But from your perspective, content design, can you talk about that, content design in general, but also what does a content designer do?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. I think there are a lot of answers out there. If you ask maybe 10 different content designers, you might get a
Sounds a lot
variation
like
along.
product design. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of similarities for sure. But I actually, yeah, I think this came up and someone else asked this too. And I wrote an answer and I saved it just for an occasion like this. But I kind of like this version I came up with a while back. But it says a content designer crafts clear, concise copy that helps someone using a digital product become the hero of their journey. With good UX writing, each word is intentional and allows someone to complete a task seamlessly. This increases confidence and trust, which drives positive business results. So, like a product designer, you're kind of balancing the user aspect of things, trying to make things clear and concise and helpful for a user, but you also have business goals, of course, to keep in mind. And so you're balancing those two things. And I just consider myself a designer who works with words. And so I
Yeah.
work collaboratively with a product designer in the areas I support, with product managers too. We have 2-week design sprint sessions, things like that. So I'm embedded within all that. And it's really great, the collaborative aspect of this job. And that's actually one of the things I enjoy most about it is like the teamwork aspect and what you can do together using your various skill sets. And I hope I bring like a good, skill set for the words there, but like doing what you can to help the team, like create something really cool for a customer in the business. So anyway, like, yeah, I just kind of view my role as kind of a voice of the product as well, like trying to keep things clear and concise and consistent across our various content ecosystems. But also, yeah, keeping the business goals in mind and trying to, solve things in an effective way. So, yeah, it's been really fun to learn as I've kind of grown in this industry and seen it evolve over time.
Yeah. Well, I love how you explain it as you're designing an experience but with words. That
Yeah.
that to me, it just speaks so much. So like what I feel we miss often in this profession when you think it's just, oh, it's going to be this. And, we design with lorem ipsum and the content's always an afterthought. I think it's
Yeah.
Bill Gates, the content's king, right?
Yeah.
And so, like we always think about content last, and we very rarely think about what content will be when we're actually done. And I just think there's so many examples of this, and especially where I work in enterprise, right? We have content is an afterthought every time. I was using an example not long ago. This is from a long time ago, but one of the applications I worked on years ago I was fiddling around with it trying to test something, and I got an error, and it said, "Dear user, there was an error. Contact sysadmin." What the hell does that mean? I just imagine someone like, "My dearest user, I hope this error finds you well and in good health. Contact sysadmin." So it's just that kind of stuff. I know, UX writing is more than just writing error messages, but that
Why?
alone kills the experience when you're trying to do something and it just blocks you. Just whoop, no path forward, no contact this person, send an email here,
Yeah.
click this button to open a ticket. It's just now what? And especially for enterprise, I'm trying to do work and now like I can't do my job and I'm going to have to stay late tonight because this
Exactly.
stupid
Yeah.
website doesn't work, right? But not only that, one of the things that I love about your explanation some time ago, right? Because I was always thinking like, oh, content design, copywriting, and your emphasis was that it's more than copywriting, it's the
Mhm.
experience, and part of I think about too is things like tutorials, onboarding,
Yeah.
FAQs, writing those in a really helpful, consistent way. And again, I go back to like enterprise where our engineers will often write FAQs. And it's just like
Yeah.
pages of screenshots and monotonous dribble and written like an engineer. And I'm like, and when I say engineer, I mean
Yeah.
like, the mechanical engineers designing the engines. And,
Yeah.
it's just like, this is impossible to read. I can't even, I don't understand what's going on. It's worse than reading lawyer speak. So can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that holistic sort of aspect of it beyond just the, something people might think, oh, an error message or, oh, a help
Yeah.
section or something.
Definitely. Oh, for sure. Yeah. When I think about content design in particular, as opposed to maybe when we talk about UX writing or something, like to me, content design is the holistic experience of like what someone might see content wise within a website, an app, support site, things like that. Like, those words really drive their experiences in all those places. And so as a content designer, I've touched content within various places and very small. Like in on my current job and previous jobs, I've actually had to write the support articles with the feature I was helping design. So at the same time, like working within Figma or wireframes, but then working on a support article on the side about this thing that was going to be shipped soon. So, like I was in charge of that. I did a product video project that I piloted within a previous job too, where we built tutorial videos that were embedded within product videos, but I use like UX writing principles, like our style guide within that too. So I kind of married those two things together and it created something that was beneficial for the customer. So yeah, it's really about like thinking beyond just, micro copy and, what you see within an app or a website even. Like it really is just the whole experience and using research and competitive analysis and other things to influence your content decisions throughout these various areas where content might be within your company. So yeah, it's super interesting. It's a lot of left brain, right brain working together. When I think about my life in journalism, it was really right brain. Like I love being kind of a creative writer and thinking about pure storytelling from like beginning, middle, and end aspect, narrative arcs, and things like that. And there are pieces of that in this work too. When I think about flows, I think about a beginning, middle, and end for a user within a certain experience or a certain flow we're trying to design. So that's helpful. But there's also just like some really nitty gritty kind of left brain storytelling or left brain like logical problems I'm trying to solve. So yeah, I get both sides of it, and it's really fun and also a challenge for me to kind of grow within that area and think about like these gymnastics that you can go through trying to think about the solution for this because it can get really interesting. And so yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me to grow in this area.
Yeah. So, here's one of the things I'm kind of curious about is the content designer within the software lifecycle. So you mentioned that you worked in sprints a minute ago, and I'm just sort of curious. Can you walk me through, you don't have to be specific about Chewy or anything, but I'm just curious, what does that generally look like? And I know that this is maturity across the board is all over the place. So it's hard to say, but I'm curious if you were to explain that sort of process within the software lifecycle to someone who is coming up UX designer, maybe thinking about getting a content design, and curious how they would work with the engineering team. Is that possible to even summarize in like a few minutes? That could be like probably an entire podcast series on its own, but
definitely part 2 coming up eventually. But yeah, no, it's great. I think like a lot of my work is with the product designer and product manager and sometimes UX research as well. So we'll be given a task from a product manager within a Jira ticket usually, and it'll have like requirements, expectations, and depending on the task or how far things are along with certain things like best case scenario, I'm brought in early, and even we'll have some UX research that we can kind of like use to kind of conceptualize what we'd like to do with the solution, things like that, the designer and I. And so it'll be kind of ground level in that way. And then we'll work together on wireframes and trying to come up with something that would work for that particular situation. And then, yeah, we're definitely keeping the product manager updated. We're having some regular syncs and trying to just, stay on target for whatever the target completion date is. So that's definitely good to keep in mind too. I'm also balancing like multiple projects too, in addition to that one I'm working on. So I'll be doing the same thing, but with a few other designers and supporting multiple designers at a time and product managers. So but then, maybe we'll have some internal testing. Maybe, we'll have to iterate on that. Of course, we have like reviews with different internal stakeholders and maybe some external stakeholders as well, if we get UX research involved with that too. And then based on that feedback, we'll go back and iterate on the designs visually and maybe the content. So there are various aspects related to the feedback that we'll touch. So yeah, it can be a pretty involved process. And as a content designer, you get used to this, but a lot of people have opinions about copy and it's kind of low hanging.
A lot of people have opinions. Yeah. Oh yeah. I bet. Not surprised.
Yeah, exactly. So your thing gets pretty thick, pretty fast. But that's good too, because, you kind of have to learn what feedback is valuable and what feedback isn't, because you get so much, you can't take and do everything.
Yeah, that's a good lesson. That's a good life lesson in general, to be honest.
For sure, definitely. So yeah, it's a pretty great process. I've learned a lot along the way, and I just love the collaborative aspect of everything, and it does make things better over time and as you iterate and see it evolve from the ground level to the end product. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you mentioned a second ago, and then maybe you alluded to it, or maybe I just inferred this is what you were talking about. But sometimes it might be words on a page, but the content might actually require videos or imagery or
Oh
illustrations
yeah.
or something like that, right? Is that part of your job too, to work with the kind of visual designers and the UX designers to say, this, instead of a list of help topics, maybe we should have a series of videos or a series of step-by-step illustrations or something to simplify this, is that part of like your role as well, to help kind of decide and design that experience?
It can be, yeah. It depends kind of on the environment and what tools are available or what initiatives are there. But yeah, in the past, I have, especially when I was running that product video project, we would have a weekly meeting, I think, with the content team, and there'd be updates about the various projects we were working on because we're usually the only content designers I'm working with in a cross-functional group. So we might be part of a content design team, but we don't really work with other content designers. We just kind of come together. But anyway, in situations like that, we'd keep everyone updated on what we're working on, and I'd be like, "Oh, do we need a video for that?" Or could this be a possible opportunity to build out a sport article or something? So that does happen just by communication with people on other teams, and then even if I'm working on a design within Figma with someone and be like, hey, what if we think about the content hierarchy in a different way? Or, maybe visually, like you're talking about, what if we change this image to something else or try to emphasize something within the value prop in a different way? Things like that. So, yeah, it's definitely just beyond like the words per se, but emails are another part of the ecosystem too. I'll write emails and they'll get sent out to customers. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on from kind of help material to customer communication to what people actually see within an app or website. Definitely content touches so many areas, and that's so exciting as a content designer to know that you can impact people in those ways in those various areas. But you also feel like the responsibility to do a good job
Yeah,
with
for
all that
sure.
because it could create a lot of calls to support. People are confused or definitely our job is to help people kind of self-serve in a lot of ways. And so we want to make things as clear as possible and give them a path forward.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm really curious about is, on a small team, it's easy to kind of keep consistent. Maybe you got one content designer and everything's in their head, right?
Yeah,
They're the go-to person. But when you start to create teams and teams across, a larger company, like something like Chewy, for instance, you don't need to spill the secrets on how Chewy does it. But I'm curious, how does a team keep consistent across that customer experience, right? From every touch point, and I'm a service designer, so I kind of think at a very high level about all these touch points. How do you keep that customer experience consistent? Tone, voice, the brand, all those things. You know, UX designers generally would have a design system to do that. Do you
yeah.
do you just sort of co-opt part of the design system and have a section for tone and voice and copy and how to write an error message versus this or that? Or do you have some other method that you guys like to use to keep those teams consistent and on brand?
Definitely. No, like, yeah, you kind of build out a style guide and voice and tone standards, how to become part of the design system. Multiple stops I've had, that's how it's been done. And I've actually been in areas in my previous job where we were in charge of kind of building out the practice and coming up with those things for the first time. And so really cool to have discussions about what do we want our standards to be? What do we do in this very granular situation? Do we want to use title case or sentence case? Do we want a period after a two-word toast message? Stuff like that. Those are like discussions we'd have.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, it's, yeah, really important to kind of provide that structure, not only for content designers, because that's our job, but also for the product designers and product managers. Because most times, at least in my situations, like our teams have been so small, we can't touch everything that's being written and all the words that appear within these various
Exactly.
ecosystems, right? We can't do everything. So we have to kind of democratize content creation and give people the tools to be successful with it. And I view evangelism as part of my job too. Like if I'm in a stand-up meeting with my design team or something and they have a question related to a style issue or something, like I kind of will try to chime in and be like, hey, this is how we handle it within our style guide. Let me drop the link to the style guide here so you can see it. We also have a word list, which is kind of more about like, use this word this way or don't use
Oh, I
this
love
word.
that. Yeah.
It goes beyond the style guide in a way. So I've had that at multiple stops. So yeah, I think it's as good as much as you can do to kind of define what content is within your design organization and create these standards so there isn't a lot of inconsistency or confusion about how to use certain components and elements. I think that goes a long way toward making a cohesive experience for the customer that will kind of create brand trust and just kind of like I don't know, create an awareness within the customer that, hey, this company is on top of its game and knows what it's doing here. So anyway, like, yeah, I think this is a lot about creating the tools to make designers, not only content designers, but product designers successful, and product managers as well, or just anyone who's writing copy within your company.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I love about this idea of content design role is having somebody that kind of owns that
Yeah.
piece, right? Because when you think
Yeah.
about
Uh-huh.
product design, right? And this is sort of where I sit, I think, as like a service designer, being above a product and seeing all the touch points, right? And when it comes to something
Yeah.
like Chewy or even where I work or Amazon, you've got products across the board and you got product designers that own a product and they're siloed. But there's
Yeah.
still that overall customer experience that and all the touch points that that is beyond just a single product designer and that thing that that one product designer owns, right?
Yes.
And I love that idea though of just being bigger than just the product and thinking about the entire customer experience across all the touch points and that being consistent because it's not about
Yeah.
the experience I have in my tool, it's about the, just like you said, the trust that I have for this brand and the trust that I have
Yeah.
at a very high level. Do I want to even come back next time because I don't
Yes.
trust them anymore, because this weird thing happened and this error message really pissed me off and I'm never coming back again because you made me contact sysadmin. So that's the kind of stuff that I love about this idea of content design. And it's just like everything else, I think, in UX design, you've got jobs to be done. I think
Yeah.
product designers, UX designers, UI designers, researchers, content designers, there's very specific skill sets that go along
Yeah.
with those roles. And you can be good at multiple things, but
Mhm.
there's still a skill set that people can excel in, I think. And I love that. I love that idea. One of the things that I'm really curious about though is because content design is so new. I imagine when you're at a company that's got content designers, you're probably going to have sort of a way that a culture of working with content designers. But since it's so new, I'm just curious, challenges that you see having to deal with people maybe not understanding what it is or not wanting to loop you in or anything. I don't want to answer the question for you, but I'm curious, challenges that you've run into as a content designer that might be unique to content design versus UX design or something else.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's unique to content design. Maybe it is in some ways, but yeah, there are a few themes I've kind of picked up over the years, especially with a small team. You definitely want to be brought in early as a content designer because sometimes the design might change based on a content problem that you see. And so if you're not brought in early, and you're just told, hey, we need to put some words in here, like that could be an issue if it's too late. And so, yeah, I think a lot of times in the worst case scenarios I've experienced, I'm just brought in too late, and we can't really do too much about something based on a fundamental design issue that relates to the content that's there. And so, yeah, I think being brought in too late is an issue. Also, I've just been part of small teams, so I've experienced this. Is just like sometimes you feel like you're stretched thin as a small team content designer. Like there are so many needs, and sometimes you feel like you have to touch every project that the design team's working on that you're supporting, and sometimes it's just exhausting or not possible. So I really admire the situations where they create these boundaries or they kind of emphasize to the content designers, hey, these are our high priority projects or C-suite goals that we have. Like, let's put you on these. And then, you can help where needed in other places, maybe through office hours or some other kind of brief touch points with designers. But really kind of prioritize the work. I think that's important. And because you just can, especially as a small team, touch everything that's being written or designed within an organization. So I think that's been an issue too. But also, yeah, the evangelism part I mentioned a bit ago, sometimes it's hard to just tell people that some of these tools you created are out there, like style guides or content standards or word lists. Like, even if you kind of like put stuff in Slack or tell people in meetings as a group or something, like sometimes you have to repeat things multiple times. So
Yes.
how we kind of sneak in. It's just
Yeah.
human nature. I get it. And if you're a product designer or product manager, you're doing a ton of other things. So totally understand. But like, yeah, that message about these tools and the things you create as a content design team to make things better, like sometimes it doesn't sink in or the awareness isn't there. And so you have to just keep kind of repeating things. Then sometimes like you have this perception as a content designer that other designers come to you as like the word people or just needing,
Yeah.
help filling in these words where it's like, no, we have a designer too, you want to think conceptually about the design, things like that. So yeah, those are some challenges, but you're right. I think with this anything that's fairly new to people, like they try to figure out how to work with this discipline, and it's a lot of like not only as a content designer, like figuring out the job and figuring out like the rhythms within your company, but also just teaching people how to work with you too. That can be a challenge, and hopefully it won't be that way. Maybe 10 years from now, maybe when in a lot of companies will be mature enough where we're beyond that discussion, but sometimes that is a real thing where it's just like you have to teach people how to work with you, and that can be exhausting. It could be rewarding, but definitely, there are a range of emotions involved with that, and it's just kind of a reality of the situation at a lot of places right
Yeah,
now.
well, when I think of, I mean, I'm not a content designer, but when I think about the roles and the things that you guys are responsible for, what the first thing that sort of jumps to mind is the overlap between a product designer and a product manager, right? So, a
Yeah,
product designer thinks I'm going to go do discovery, and a product manager thinks I'm going to go do discovery, and then, I'm going to
yeah,
write requirements. I'm going to come with requirements. I'm going to do requirements. So there's a lot of overlap there, which tends to lead often to butting of heads. I want to own this. This is my
um,
thing, And so I'm curious, is that something you run into a lot where with content design where the UX designer is like, I'm going to do this. I don't need you. I got it. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Maybe there's different personalities. Some people probably happy to have the help and some people probably, and it probably all depends on the people, but is that something you've ever run into? I'm curious.
that's a great question. Not really, not too often. I've been really lucky to work with some great designers, good people, and usually they're super happy for the help actually,
Yeah.
because I think they're looking for that content help. And so, yeah, for the most part, I've had really good experiences. I think there are some issues, like especially early in my career when maybe I didn't have as much confidence, where I had to like sell people on like, I can still do this even though I don't really know what I'm doing yet. That kind of thing where, that was a real thing, I think, early in my career, my first UX job. And so anyway, like that just improved over time. And as you just work with people, you gain their trust. And as you kind of just do more, you build up trust within yourself too. And I saw that growth over time with myself. But yeah, I think for the most part, especially within UX, like I feel like, designers, like product designers, content designers, UX researchers, we all kind of have this feeling of like we're in this together. We're trying to really make things work for the betterment of the business and the customer. So yeah, I've had pretty good experiences so far, and I hope it continues that way because I think there is a big difference between a job where you can feel that tension
Oh,
and
yeah.
there's some like turf battles and things like that, compared to a job where people kind of respect each other's skill sets and kind of lean on someone who's more specialized in a certain area to complete that task related to that strength. And so, yeah, I just kind of hope it continues in a good way in the future.
I guess it's one of those things too. It all depends on the personalities on the team, right? Like some people embrace that idea of collaboration,
Yeah,
and some people run as far away from it as they possibly can. And those people in general are probably going to be a pain in the ass, regardless of what role,
that's true.
what role they work on. But
Well,
yeah,
you're right.
well, that's cool. Yeah, so I'm curious. When you think about the types of tools, this is something I'm really curious about. Product designers generally get Figma and Miro or something. Do you guys have is there a tool set, or is it just Word or Google Docs or whatever process, Excel or something? Or is there something specialized? Do you guys use something special that people might not be aware of, or is it just, writing tools?
Yeah, no, we work within Figma. I've worked in Framer as well in previous jobs. So, I mean, I'm working in designs most of the time. I'm glad we're at that point now where people view content designers as like, you go into the design, you work with a copy within a design. So you're working collaboratively with the product designer within those designs, and you're like, editing the copy or moving copy around or changing color on the copy, things like that. So yeah, I work within Figma a lot. I have used just for personal use, like things like Grammarly for just grammar checks, spelling checks, things like that before I put stuff into Figma. So I use that. I use Word Tune. It's like an AI type tool to kind of reword things. If you're stuck on a way to phrase something, it'll give you suggestions based on the sentence you put in. So that's kind of helpful for me. I've done that before. I have worked in situations where it wasn't as open for a content designer to work directly in the design. So we actually had to like leave comments within like an InVision file or, a Google slide deck or something like that based on the screenshot of the screen that the designer was working on in Sketch or something. So anyway, yeah, that's been a workflow for me. I'm not the best by any means or most efficient, but that's something I've had to do in the past is like change this to this, put the
Yeah.
comment. So
Yeah.
that's been something I've done. Google Docs just for like long form writing. If I'm doing like a support article or something like that, I've worked with that quite a bit too. So that back when I was doing video stuff, worked with like Adobe Creative Suite things quite a bit, Premiere, Audition, Photoshop, things like that. So yeah, I've worked with a ton of tools in the past. I always tell like new young designers, like don't get married to any
Yeah.
one tool or think you have to become an expert like in
Absolutely.
Figma. I mean, Figma is becoming like the design tool of choice in the industry, I feel like, but still, I mean, you never know when these tools might change or the priorities might change within the company and they're going to switch to another tool or things get too expensive and they'll drop something.
Oh yeah,
So it's like,
absolutely.
it's kind of like concentrate on the actual, skills and like, work on your interpersonal skills and cross-functional collaboration, things like that. And then I think that stuff like that is timeless, whereas some of these other things related to tools might not be as timeless. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. I was, Julia Dabari by any chance? She's on LinkedIn. Yeah, she's great. She's I don't know what you call her, thought leader. I don't know. She's great. She's
Awesome.
involved with like almost everything. She's content creator. She does like she education for boot camps and all kinds of
That's
writes a bunch of
awesome.
articles and all this stuff. Anyway, she commented on something the other day and she mentioned, and this is brilliant, I thought, but the fundamentals, it's all about people and then pen and paper.
Yeah.
And if you can do it on pen and paper, you can do it on anything. It's just
And
do it on pen and paper first. And then if you need to learn a tool, go learn how to put that pen and paper, whatever you did, in the tool, But it could be writing, it could be drawing, it could be illustration, it could be whatever. Just do that on the
yeah.
paper first and then figure out what tool you need to digitize it. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy. So I'm curious. ChatGPT, AI, everything that's huge right now, right? Is ChatGPT or AI something you guys are embracing as content designers to make your job easier? Or are you guys, is there a fear or concern that AI is going to take over and everyone's going to lose their job? Not to be all doom and gloom about it, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, that'd be all doom and gloom. We have dark cloud above.
As the thunder strike. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's mostly curiosity right now. I haven't really done anything in my day-to-day job related to ChatGPT, other than maybe like read a lot of things about it. But it's definitely something I can see evolve and kind of become a bigger part of the workflow in the future if companies kind of understand its value. I don't think it's possible yet in its current form to replace what UX designers work or content designers work. There's so much like problem solving involved and iteration and things that change, like requirements change in mid sprint sometimes or something. I think there's a lot of like just human stuff that happens within a product development experience. So I don't think it's possible yet. Thankfully, hopefully I have job security.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a threat yet, but I do think it's something that we should think about. And I think it could be used as a tool to help our workflows in particular in the future. I think we still need to be very careful about having a voice of the customer and having something that is like, I don't know, kind of like a human voice within our products. Cause sometimes I read Chat GPT answers. I'm like, I can tell this was AI written and it's like a machine.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, some of the stuff I don't think we want within our products. But yeah, I think like there are certain use cases, especially within like some day-to-day workflows or documentation things, I think it would be helpful. But yeah, aside from just reading about it or just kind of like having curiosity about the topic, I haven't done much with it yet, but I'm curious to see if that'll change over time because I do think the way things are moving now and how fast things are moving with, Google jumping in the game too, and Facebook, Meta has an interest in creating more AI tools as well. I think this will continue to just evolve and grow really quickly in the next 5 years. And I can see it being a part of day-to-day life, not only for people in our field, but other areas where people work as well. I think this could be a huge thing for marketing or other areas of content creation too, where these will be regular tools that people use, and it'll be pretty interesting to see how they evolve. But also, I'm a little concerned about, the downsides of all this too. And I hope we create some
Yeah.
boundaries related to the things, because they could spiral in a negative way. And I just hope that we kind of use these things with discipline and in the right way, and we create these things in the right way too. And kind of interested to see how all that changes in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. This again could probably be an entire episode series on its own. But one of the things that it's funny, I saw this meme on LinkedIn. It was just like, designers are safe until AI can figure out what the customer actually needs
Yeah,
versus
that's
what
true.
someone tells it at once. Then we're safe.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
you
Yeah,
know,
great distinction.
yeah. And so, that's like, it's so true. Cause like part our job as UX professionals, regardless of if it's content design, product design, UX design, whatever, it's not to do as we're told. It is to question. It is to understand and uncover insights, and,
Yeah,
until AI can somehow magically do research and go talk to actual humans and uncover those insights and then figure out how to turn that into very specific requirements to fulfill those needs that it uncovered, maybe
exactly.
that'll happen one day, I don't know, but I don't see that ever happening anytime soon. Until then, it's great for brainstorming, and I do stuff like with the podcast, like a bio. Somebody will send me a ridiculous long bio.
Yeah.
I'll feed it into ChatGPT and spit out a shortened version, or you know what I mean? Or hey, what's 10
Cool, yeah.
interesting topics for questions or something, and it'll sort of spark
Oh,
some
yeah, yeah.
ideas, and but there's
Yeah,
always a
that's cool.
human element to it. You don't just copy and paste. If you do, you look
Yeah.
like a knucklehead. One of the things I was kind of thinking of is kind of interesting, and maybe you guys can build this. I don't know. This is anyone listening. I don't know how to do this, so
Yeah.
take this and do what you want with it. But if you could train a model on your tone and voice, and then
Mm.
type in something, and it'll translate it into that proper on brand tone and voice, you know, that would be kind of cool. That would probably save you guys a lot of time and that help with that quote unquote democratization, like you talked about.
Yeah.
So that people are
Yeah.
actually using the rules and algorithms that you have, but someone still has to create that though. That's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah,
something
that's
that
true.
the
Yeah.
machine just knows how to
Yeah.
do. It's something a team has to design, And so anyway, I find that fascinating. It's just, helping us do our
Yeah.
job easier, not doing our job for us, at least right
Yeah.
now.
No, definitely. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And hopefully, yeah, we can always have our dreams. That's for sure. But yeah, no, that's interesting. I like what you said about maybe like getting to that point where it understands like a voice and tone and standards that you have. That'd be really interesting. One thing, if we got to that point, I can see being a challenge based on just what I see in my workflows. These things change over
Yeah,
time.
how do you
Like
update it?
we have standards, and someone will be like, "Hey, like, what, I ran to this situation. Maybe this other approach is better. So we'll change our style guide based on feedback, or designers or product managers bringing stuff to our attention." So I think it's like a forever evolving thing, like a style guide or a word list or a controlled vocabulary, things you come up with. So like it'd be really interesting to see how that would work in the future, like training something on a continuous living document. I wonder how that would work. Yeah.
So I'm like geeking out on this problem right now. This could be like a really cool like
Yeah.
whiteboard design challenge. But here's what I'm thinking in my head, right? You're probably familiar with how translation works on websites, where a lot of people might not know, but you got a file that's just all of the variables that get plugged into a website, and it might be like
Yeah.
hello, right? And that might be English. French would be bonjour. Italian would be benvenuto, whatever. That's welcome, I guess. Whatever. Ciao, right? Whatever. I took 4 semesters of Italian. I can't remember what hello is. So that's, and then each language has its own file, and then that variable gets plugged in. So if you could figure out how to do this, but you have a file that's like all of your commands or copy, essentially, like hello, right?
Yeah.
And then you decide, that it changes in the style guide, and then it just gets
Yeah.
updated across everything, and then everything's consistent. So you don't have to have an engineer go back in and update 1,000 pages. It just updates it based on the model as it happens, or as it gets changed,
Yeah.
or pushed to production, I guess. But anyway,
Yeah.
just an idea.
That's
Anybody
awesome.
out there figuring out? That's just one thought. I could geek out about this problem all day. But anyway, that's just like really fascinating. I love that idea of consistency though across all the channels, and that word gets updated, or that tone and voice gets updated across the email and welcome
Mhm.
messages and error messages and this and that and
Oh, sure.
whatever, all the touch
Yeah.
points. All right. I love that. Figure out how to do that. And then you can sell it. I
Yeah,
just want to cut
exactly.
anybody out
My
there,
to-do list.
anybody figures out how to do that
Yeah.
and you can sell it. I want 5%. I don't even need 10%.
Yeah,
Just
give some
5%, just for everyone.
commission.
All right. So a lot of people out there, junior designer transitioners looking to get in the UX field, might be interested in content design. I want to talk a little bit about how people might get into content design. And you called out, the way you did it before. You might go back and think. So with your years now of experience doing this, looking back, what advice would you give young Andrew to get into content design that isn't just fumbling through it like you mentioned before? Skills, background, education, whatever it is. What advice do you have to get into this field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really fortunate that quite a few people reach out to me on LinkedIn and ask me this question. And sometimes I'll hold like 30-minute video chats with people and just talk about my career and journey. And they
You're a
ask me,
thought leader now, dude.
oh, I don't know about that. Yeah. It's like, oh, knock me down a peg or two, please. But no, it's really fun. And I love giving back because I kind of feel like I was really lucky to fall into this. And so it's like my way of like paying the universe back and being like, hey, let me help out a little bit. But yeah, what I always tell people is like, one, they're like way ahead of where I was if they're even thinking about this, because I kind of like didn't know I wanted to break into UX before I did. And so like, I was very, very lucky. But I also think there was something to my situation where having that connection within a company and having someone who could vouch for my work ethic and character, and then, telling the hiring manager about me in that particular situation where it was a small company in particular, I think that really helped and made it possible for me to get the interview. And then from the interview, it was just about like speaking to my transferable skills and some of the experiences I had in my journalism life and how it might help me, in this content design world. And so I spoke about working with like, people on a beat that I was covering, or even photographers who are out in the field with me, or these various other cross-functional partners. Like there's so many transferable skills we have in these various industries that could work within the UX world if you're trying to break in. Like I see a lot of parallels between what I do now and what I did in my previous life, just based on like working with people in a certain way and like being collaborative and just coming up with a compromise when necessary and things like that, and meeting deadlines. I think like there's a lot of stuff you can emphasize in an interview as far as transferable skills go that would be really helpful for your case as you're trying to break in. But yeah, I'd tell people just to definitely show some intention too and some curiosity about content design, or if you're wanting to break into UX design as well, just like, I don't like to tell people they have to take a expensive 6-month boot camp or something, but if you take something like that, or just do like a free self-paced, course, or just like watch a lot of YouTube videos, or just like do anything you can and kind of like show that you've done some self-education, that you're interested in this. Because I think a lot of times hiring managers are looking for just someone they know they can trust to make the transition and kind of like, be motivated enough to kind of evolve within this new life. And so I tell people that try to get some samples and whatever way you can, whether it's freelance work or, those free writing exercises online that people can look up related to, free UX writing exercises, that's good to do. But yeah, like I went through this really cold in 2018 where I didn't have anything. That's just kind of going off of my journalism experience. But I think at the same time, it was helpful for me then to kind of explain, like, some of these skills I had that I was bringing over and how those would help me make the transition. And I think that was wise to do. But bringing it a step further today, I would definitely like show some intention before the interview, like try to have some samples to show related to content design or some kind of UX problem, and then kind of speak to that or speak to a course I completed or X, Y, and Z of what I taught myself based on these online tools. So yeah, I think that's how I go about it now. A little more depth involved than what I did back
now
then.
you had a background in writing, right? You went to school for writing, right?
Yeah.
Do you
I
think
did.
So journal, do you think it helps to have that background in writing or technical writing or some kind of writing? Or do you feel like that is maybe nice to have but not necessary? Is that background in writing something that I would imagine it helps, but do you think it's necessary to be really successful, or is it just a nice to have?
That's a great question. I think I'd make a small distinction with it. I think it's definitely like helpful, but I don't think it's necessary. I know some people who were like teachers who are wanting to get into content design, or people who are like professors or something. And like, I come from so many different backgrounds, and you don't necessarily have to be like a pure writer to succeed in this field, because writing is only a small part of the content design job. There's a lot of like research involved and problem solving and things like that. So if you love to do those things and it kind of sparks your imagination and passion, like yeah, you should definitely like try to explore this and see if you want to do it further. So yeah, you'll find a lot of people in content design that came from like a journalism or some kind of English background or things like that. But there are a lot of people too who are beyond that and weren't pure writers before who are really good at this job. And so yeah, I'd say like if you don't have that background, I wouldn't let that stop you if you're interested in it. Just continue to kind of explore the field and know that this job is much more than just writing. And, you definitely like if you're interested in problem solving and working with people to create effective solutions, then this can definitely be an interesting field for you.
So you mentioned, again, I love that you're stressing this. It's not just writing. So what
Yeah.
that tells me, there's a lot of transferable skills, I think, from a UX design
Yeah.
position. So if there are people out there listening who are UX designers now and are thinking about getting into content design, what skills from that UX design role do you think would be really transferable, almost applying directly? I could think of things like,
Yeah.
information architecture, for instance,
Oh,
like
for
laying
sure.
out a thing or understanding how bits of content, relate to others, like, that kind of thing. Anything else? I'm curious, like maybe not visual design necessarily, but are there other things? You mentioned research before.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, the things you mentioned, I think, would be directly related, be good. I would actually love to see more of that happen. Sometimes you see people go the other way, where it's content design to UX design, and then maybe project management or something. But yeah, I think like anyone who is interested in making the jump to content design completely, like if you've been working as a product designer, like you're embedded in this discipline. If you've been working with a content designer, you might have some experience with how they think about consistency and intention behind words and using research to kind of influence and validate content decisions, things like that. So, yeah, I'd say there are some really direct comparisons and parallels there. And so, like, yeah, if you're interested in that, like, I would definitely continue to explore because I think that you'd be so strong in just like the design aspect of things and thinking just in a way that is effective from not only a content angle, but also just from, a storytelling aspect within design and how that would be effective for the user and also accomplish a business goal. So, yeah, I think there'd be so many direct comparisons between the two. And I'd love to see more UX designers actually make that transition in content design. I think it'd be really interesting to see that and be beneficial for a design organization for that to happen for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was just kind of thinking out
Yeah.
loud, and I know you're not an expert in this necessarily, but when I think about right now, finding jobs in UX design is almost impossible because there are just so many people looking for very small amount of UX roles. But content design, there's probably not a lot of people looking for content design roles. That said, there probably aren't a lot of content design roles to be had. But as people find the value in these roles, I imagine more content design roles will open and there will start to be more demand. Do you think, and again, I don't want to put you in a spot if you don't know the answer, just say it pass. But do you think if this is something that people are looking to get into, there might be a better opportunity and maybe more likelihood to get that content design job than trying to fight the thousands of people who have just been laid off from Figma or from the FANG companies, trying to get those very small few UX roles? Do you have any thoughts there? Is that something you've ever thought about? Or I don't know if there's talk
Yeah.
in content design circles about this, but I'm just curious what you think.
No, it's a great question. Yeah, I think it is a really difficult time. And I kind of feel bad for someone who may be interested in following the same path I did about like changing careers because now hiring managers have more of a choice to kind of hire someone who might not be looking otherwise, like someone who's mid level or senior level, so it's difficult out there. But I'd say like look for a job that might not be labeled content designer or UX content strategist or
Mm,
something like you're
that's a good
working
point.
at a company, yeah, that's like allowing you to work within a digital experience in some way, whether it's a website, or their emails or, their blog or something like you're doing content design in some fashion. And so content is design. I like to say a lot of times, but like, if you can get experience however you can in areas like that, you can add that to your portfolio and speak about it for a content designer job later that you might apply for. But I just think about just trying to find any way in to just show that you can do this work in this way. And there are a lot of companies out there as they build their digital practices and like want to invest in these areas, they might not know like what quote unquote content design is
Yes.
sometimes with
Yeah.
Shelby.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I would definitely like, if you're frustrated about getting declined at places or denied for these jobs, like think about your job search in that way. Look for these companies that might not be tech companies or something, but are like investing in their websites or investing in other digital aspects of their business and try to find a way to work on the content within those. And then you can be a content designer and kind of like, invent things like build a style guide or, a controlled vocabulary or something and really establish yourself that way, then add it to your portfolio and have that just benefit you throughout your career. So I think about things in that way at this point.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. That like, let's say you have a job and you're a UX designer, and your job is to be a UX designer or product designer, and you see a need for this. If you can advocate it, right? This is again one of the skills that you said was very important: storytelling, influence, things like that. If you can advocate for this and you're interested in it, start doing it. Start
Yeah.
talking about it. Start normalizing it, right? And
Yeah.
eventually, if it becomes in demand enough at that company, maybe you can move into a content design specific role or push for them to hire someone who does that full time.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these higher ups, the stakeholders, the product, the hiring managers, the people who lead software teams, if they're not UX designers, and often they're not, they might not have any idea that this is even something
Yeah.
somebody should be trying to do. They
Exactly.
might feel the outcome of not having it, but they might not understand that having this role could help there. So, that's
Yeah.
something I think a lot about too. If you're interested in anything, I mean, content design, whatever kind of design, all the various titles we have now, if you're
Yes.
interested in that, advocate for it within your own team and start to do it and start to
Yeah.
try to get that thing to be normalized and, whatever it is, content design, anything else. You mentioned something a second ago. I'm really curious. Content design portfolios.
Oh, yeah.
If you're going and applying for a content design role, are you expected to have or sort of a traditional portfolio with case studies and things like that? Or are you more just samples of writing and, do people expect a write up like with process and outcomes and all the crap that you hear, UX designers need in their case studies?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think like in the past few experiences I've had during a job search, like it's pretty much the first situation you mentioned where you're expected to present maybe 2 to 3 case studies and kind of explain from a beginning, middle, and end point, like what you did and like how you affected the project, and then have any data that you can show related to the outcome of your work. And so, yeah, I kind of just try to tell a small story with each project, but also have screenshots related to the content I worked on, maybe tables or Excel, files related to any data that was, complementary to my project, things like that. So, yeah, I'd say it's very like similar to the UX design experience, the UX designer experience now, where you have these case studies. You have to explain like your impact and your thought process behind the work and what you did to solve problem X, Y, Z, things like that. And then not only talking about those things, but also then the impact of the work, maybe the kind of the I don't know, the legacy of it, if it's still standing today, like, is it something that's impacted the business with a certain dollar amount, or did it decrease churn, things like that. So that's something I've heard people talk about too. But I think some of the best case studies or the best things to talk about are really like from a content designer standpoint is like an end-to-end experience where you're owning the content from the very beginning, conceptualization, to the end through working with stakeholders, having it implemented with engineering, and maybe even QAing things from a content perspective, and then seeing it out in the world and maybe iterating on things later if you see a problem. But yeah, those are kind of the most effective case studies, I think, from a content design standpoint, is that end-to-end experience.
No, it's funny you mentioned that from the content design perspective. I would love to see that from the UX design
Yeah,
perspective
that's
and not
right.
just here, I did step one, step two, step three, done.
Yeah.
Like here's my thing, here's my artifact. Like, shut up. Just like tell me what you did, how you did it, and why it was beneficial.
Yeah.
And how you worked with the people to get it done. I think that's huge. But yeah, I would love, I would love to see that for everybody, dude.
I know. It's
All
almost
right.
good.
So we have been talking for a little bit. I know you got a hard stop in a few minutes. I got some questions I want to ask you in a little bit, but before we do that, resources, anything you want to leave with the listeners to go and investigate a little bit more, find out a little bit more about it, maybe start learning, people to follow, things like that. You could give some shout outs now, and then we'll also link to everything in the show notes as well. But any resources that you have that you like a lot that you think people should check out to help learn more about content design?
Oh, definitely. Well, 2 organizations that stand out right away, the UX Writing Hub and UX Content Collective, if you're interested in content design. definitely look at those. There's a website called the UX Writing Library too that has a bunch of links to not only those organizations I mentioned, but a lot of different things as well. I had a post a while back on LinkedIn about a ton of people I follow there,
Yeah.
a lot of interesting voices.
I
There's
think I
pretty,
asked you that. I think that was
yeah,
me. I actually
you
asked you,
did.
like, who do you
Wow,
follow?
glad
Yeah.
you did. That was great.
That was a
No,
lot of people, by the way. I was very impressed. I have this thing where it's funny because whenever I don't pay for premium, and every time I look at too many profiles, I get suspended
oh
because
no,
they think I'm a bot.
you're,
So I just like now it's like I'll just look at like 4 or 5 people a day because I don't even know what the number is. LinkedIn support won't tell me. But if I look at too many people, it happens every time. Like, oh,
yeah.
follow these people, and I'll do it. The next day, I'll get suspended.
Oh
So I
no, I
haven't
haven't.
followed everybody, but I got that list. But anyway, you know what? I'll post a link to that list. But anyway, so you post the list. And
Yeah,
do you have any off the top of the head anybody you want to call out specifically? I hate putting people on the spot because I know someone asked me to. I'm going to leave somebody out. But if you don't
yeah,
feel,
no,
yeah,
no, definitely. She wasn't on the list, but I forever be grateful for Catherine Hosmer was my first UX writing manager and gave me my first job in this industry. And I just want to shout out her and just tell people like if you're able to break through in anything and change careers, like it really does take a special hiring manager sometimes to make that happen. And so I just want you to keep that in mind if you're thinking about changing careers. Like really try to find an empathetic teacher-like figure early in your design career. And I was lucky to have that with her, and definitely shout out to her for making this all possible for me. Really changed my life in a lot of ways. Yeah.
are there courses or boot camps that exist that people could like
Yeah.
university courses and things that are specifically related to like product related, software related content design? I'm not even sure if that even exists.
Yeah, well, there are some boot camps out there. I was an academy mentor for the UX Writing Hubs course. It was called the UX Writing Academy. It was like a 6-month course. So I did that. Really cool experience for me to just work really closely with one or two mentees during that time and kind of week by week, kind of look at their UX writing work and kind of give them feedback on their exercises. And they ended up doing like a research project at the end, which was really cool to see. So anyway, like that was a really neat experience. I know a lot of people have taken advantage of that over time. Definitely worth checking out if you're interested in doing an extensive course. I think the UX Writing Hub has a free option as well. It's a little less intensive, but definitely a little more cost effective too. So definitely think about checking that out. UX Content Collective also has courses available, and both of those organizations definitely suggest anyone who's interested in learning about things to check out their offerings there. And I think there are definitely like courses that go beyond just like the general like introduction to UX writing now. Like they have Figma courses for content designers
Oh,
and things
cool.
like that. Like, so definitely look at all these offerings and can definitely like get your overall like background and introduction into what the field is if that interests you. But there are also some of these other niche opportunities that they offer too that could be beneficial and really good for people who are interested in things.
Right on. This is a totally random question. Well, I guess not random because it's related to content design. But are there any Figma plugins for content design specifically? I don't know what that plugin would even do, but I don't know. That's why I'm not making plugins.
Oh man. Yeah, I know Frontitude, I think, is a company that's come out with some, and I've heard them and their work. It's been really good from what I hear. I've never used it, but I'd like to see more out there for sure, because I think that could really help with consistency and creating even like references for product designers as they're working in Figma files and things like that. Like, I'd love to see more of that. So that's definitely like a frontier I think that could be developed more over time.
So, one before we do the questions, let's let everybody know how to find you. LinkedIn, you anywhere else on any other social media or anything else, or you just do LinkedIn?
That's a good question. I used to be all over the place, but ever since getting out of sports media, I kind of just narrowed down on LinkedIn. So find me there. I try to post every day, try to make it collaborative and have a conversation with
Oh, I
people I
love it.
really love, find a
Yeah, dude.
comment. So yeah, check me out on LinkedIn. And then if you send me a message, sometimes I'm really late to respond, but I'll try to get around to it eventually. But yeah, I definitely would love to see you there if you
Right
check
on.
me out.
Yeah, I love all your stuff on LinkedIn. It's definitely one of the highlights of my day is all your posts. But yeah, you do the a bunch of stuff every week. You have kind of like a series that you do. The
I
the,
do.
the
Yeah, I
weekly
kind of.
recap you've been doing, the working guide, which is really cool. I actually interviewed Dr. David Leitner. He's an expert on followership, and one of the things he recommended doing if you're
That's really
having
cool.
trouble with a team member or a manager or whatever is creating a way to work with you. And I was like, Andrew's doing it. He's got it. Chewy does it. That's like I love how you guys do that actually as like part of your onboarding. But anyway,
Yeah, it was a little
that's a really
boring.
cool thing. But you're doing that kind of stuff, and anyway, all kinds of awesome insights. the open chat if you got any questions to ask Andrew. He does it every Sunday, so make sure you check him out there. All right, you ready for these questions? Get you out of here. 15
Yeah.
minutes, you got a meeting, so we'll let you go. What is your favorite non-design book?
Oh man, non-design book. I'd have to say early on I read North Toward Home by Willie Morris. Kind of like an old school book, but it was about a person who went on to be a great editor for Harper's, things like that. But he grew up in Mississippi and kind of a rural environment, kind of like what I did in Western Kansas, and really kind of inspiring about how someone could grow up in that environment, go on to the big city, be ambitious, and do good things. So yeah, I read that in college, and it definitely still sticks with me to this day. Yeah.
Right on. I love it. All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast?
Oh, wow. Here's a really bad confession. I'm like terrible about like keeping up with podcasts, but on long road trips sometimes, my wife, yeah, I know exactly. But my wife and I will listen to like Bravo related podcasts, like the Bravo show. So
Okay.
like Vanderpump Rules or like Southern Charm, stuff like that. So like the characters from their podcasts. So I'd say just like for
Is that your
mindless
favorite by default? That's the only way to
like, hey, happy wife, happy life.
I heard that, dude. I heard that. All right. What is your favorite meal? And this could be something you've cooked, you've eaten out at a restaurant, maybe something your grandma cooked that you just remember from being a kid.
Man, there's so many things. I love food. Food's actually a passion of mine. And living in Atlanta, we have a lot of great options. But I like biscuits and gravy. Actually, have ever since I was a kid. My mom used to make it. But even living down here now, there's so many cool like biscuit options at various restaurants here and styles of biscuits. And then you add that gravy on top, like sausage and like a over easy egg if you want to get really intense, and some hot sauce.
God, yeah.
So,
Hell yeah. It's spoken like a true Southerner right there.
Yeah, that's right. That's my
biscuits
go-to.
And gravy, egg and a hot sauce on top.
It's some good stuff, man. Yeah, I love it.
All right. What's your favorite vacation spot?
Oh man, I'd have to go back to my honeymoon. We went to the Greek islands, and so we hopped around like Santorini, Naxos, Mykonos. We did Athens as well. Did all the history stuff there, but we really like the islands the most. And so if I had to pick one of them, though, it'd probably be Santorini. Just really beautiful. You know, we stayed on the cliffs there at a hotel, and you'd open the door, and there'd be the water there with the cruise ships below. And so I'd love to go back someday.
Yeah,
it's a gorgeous place. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. I've never been. Yeah, it's on my list. I got a long bucket list. A lot of places in Europe I want to visit. If it wasn't so damn expensive. All right. What is your favorite? What's your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
That's a good question. Wow. To think about this one. When I was doing product videos, I really enjoyed the Adobe Creative Suite. So like Adobe Audition, I don't know if that's like a true design tool in the way we're talking about things, but I thought it was really fun. Yeah, to kind of be like, you know, just kind of self-teaching with all that. Like I didn't really have anyone teach me. I was just Googling a lot or YouTubing. But like some of the things you could do with that, I really had fun with it and enjoyed it. Yeah.
Kids today, man, they don't appreciate this, but like all the Adobe Creative Suite, I used to go, like this was back in like 2003, 4, 5, or like long time ago. And you would get these magazines. They were mostly from the UK, like Web Designer Magazine, Digital Designer was another one, either Digital Arts, I think that was what it was called. And they had CDs on the back. And the CDs had like tutorial files, and it was like how to recreate this Illustrator thing in Illustrator or this thing in Photoshop or whatever. That's how I taught myself, man, all the Creative Suite stuff. This was back in CS3, man, back in the day.
Oh, yeah, back in the day.
CS4 or 5, back when you could pirate it for get it for free. Not anymore. Adobe fixed that one.
Now. Yeah.
All right. I got one more question. Lanyap, I don't normally ask this, but you, if I'm not mistaken, you lived in New Orleans during the Super Bowl, right? When the Saints won the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Okay. Now that you're in Atlanta, do you root for the Falcons? Or do you have a special place in your heart for the Saints?
Oh man, that's a great question. I'll never forget that time actually. And I bring up New Orleans, like being on Bourbon Street. I was there actually doing a story for ESPN.com page 2 about the scene in New Orleans during Super Bowl night. And so that was something I'll never forget. I actually don't follow the Falcons as like a true fan. I'll keep the game on though.
We can stay friends.
They find, that's a good point. But they just find ways to lose. It's actually really hilarious to see like, okay, they're ahead by like 10 with 5 minutes left. They're going to lose this somehow. And
yeah, right. Oh, dude, in New Orleans, it's so funny that, what is I can't remember the score, but it was like 23-3 or something like that, right? And the Falcons ended up going and losing that game. And we, like the Saints, we put in everything. There was actually a local brewery that would just print that on the bottom of their cans, 23-3. Whatever the score was. I can't remember the score. But yeah, the Saints and the Falcons, they hate each other.
They do.
It's funny because living in Cincinnati, they're in completely different conferences. So the Saints and they play each other, I think, every other year. But it's like an exhibition game, it's not an exhibition. Well, they play each other every year, but it doesn't really count towards the Super Bowl, but towards the playoffs. But it's fun because I don't have to like root against each other. I can root for both Cincinnati and New Orleans.
And my wife's from Cincinnati, and so we'll watch the Bengals whenever we get them down here in Atlanta on TV. So it's been fun to follow them lately. We actually did a thing where, in the playoffs, and the Bengals have been in the playoffs a lot the past few years, we make some Skyline stuff at home here. You could buy like the little canned Skyline chili.
Yeah,
and,
make a Skyline dip, Skyline pizza. And all that.
We do that.
I've been here 2 years. I still can't do the Skyline stuff.
I know. I understand.
I don't mind Cincinnati chili, honestly. It's the Skyline specifically. It's so it's like water. You don't get me started. I'm going to insult your wife. I don't want to insult your wife. People in Cincinnati take that stuff seriously, man. You start insulting their Skyline, and boy.
That's tough. Yeah.
You might appreciate this. So people don't know there's two big chili parlor chains in Cincinnati. There's Skyline and there's Gold Star. And you're either a Skyline person or you're a Gold Star person. And I work with all these guys, and we have the Slack channel. And during the Super Bowl this year, or during the playoffs, when the Cincinnati was playing the playoffs, we're going to make some Skyline dip. So I was like, hey guys, am I doing this right? And I took a picture of like my Skyline dip, but I had a can of Gold Star. So I made my Skyline dip with Gold Star. I was like, am I doing this right? And they were like, you son of a bitch.
I was like, totally hard for me to do Gold Star. Like, my wife's such a Skyline person. I still haven't had Gold Star in all our times going to Cincinnati. I'll have to sneak away sometime.
Man, I tell you, so here's the thing. Everybody listening probably couldn't care less because they're not going to have it. But if you're in Cincinnati, Gold Star has some locations. They do burgers. And their burgers are actually really good. So, and whenever I go there, I get their burgers. They're like kind of like smash burgers, sort of. They're not as good as like some other, but they're definitely better than like McDonald's or Burger King. So. But I like Gold Star because you go in and they have a waitress and you can like sit down and stuff, and it's not like fast food. So anyway, I like Gold Star, but whatever. My kids like their chicken strips. So
that's good. I love chicken strips too. I'll have to try it out sometimes. It's been a big curiosity for a while. I'll have to make it happen.
Tell your wife. I don't want you to end up divorced. So all right, cool, Andrew. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been fantastic. I love all the stuff about content design. Super fascinating me. Anybody out there who's interested, please follow Andrew. Follow some of those folks that he mentioned. Check out all that stuff. If you want to get into content design, I think this is really important. Remember, UX design, it's more than just design. It's more than just the visuals on the screen. Content design is a huge part of it too. Don't overlook the content design. All right, Andrew, thank you so much, man. Well, all right, y'all, that's it for Andrew and me for today. I hope we helped shed a little bit of light on content design, what a content designer does, how you can get into content design. I think it's really important. This is something that we should definitely not be overlooking in our day-to-day work as UX professionals. But I'm curious, anybody out there that successfully transferred from or transitioned from UX design to content design, or anybody out there doing content design that has a different perspective from Andrew, let me know what you think on LinkedIn. Shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you can imagine. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, wanted to tell them about it, that'd be fantastic. If you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. And there are some awesome perks like that badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shout out on the show every week. And there's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. And head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to download Design as a Job by Mike Montero. Sign up for a free 30-day Audible trial, cancel at any time, and the book is yours to keep forever. And in case you forgot, I've partnered with audible.com, so anytime you sign up for a free trial, you'll help support the show. There's no obligation, and you can cancel at any time, and the audiobook is yours to keep forever. So get a free audiobook on me and help support the show. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes, along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX than design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. So if you cough, sneeze, whatever, don't mute yourself. I'll edit it out. Don't worry about that.
It sounds good.
See, like that. I'll cut that out. It's just two
Nice.
dudes chit-chatting about a bunch of bullshit. That's basically
That's awesome.
that's basically
I
what
love
this
that.
is.